Hello, and welcome to my show on interpersonal communication. My name is Dr. Marquita Byrd, and my students call me Dr. B. I hope you will too if we ever meet. The purpose of my show is to help people to live their better lives by understanding what interpersonal communication is. We all engage in it from the time we're born to the time we die, but we may not understand the mechanics of it. We do have a lot of information about it because every day that you live, you're learning more about interpersonal communication. But this course kind of formalizes things. The second thing I'd like to do is to facilitate your acquisition of skills and knowledge that will allow you to improve your life in the future so that you can continue to improve your interpersonal relationships across the lifespan. This is a course that's not just important today. This is a course that you use across the lifespan. I am a professor emeritus at San Jose State University, and I wanted to extend what I teach in my courses to the general public so that all of us can have better lives. So today I'm going to be talking about a very, very important thing called self-disclosure. Self-disclosure. And I'm talking about self-disclosure because we all engage in it all day, but we may not be aware of our disclosures and what they may be doing to us. A self-disclosure is when you share yourself with another through talk, or now in the age of cyberspace, you can share yourself with another through the internet, through writing, many ways that we can share ourselves, but it's communicating and sharing ourselves with another person. And that's very important because self-disclosure provides content for your interpersonal relationships. Of course, behavior and the things that you do provide content, but also self-disclosure does. Self-disclosure, in order for a statement to be disclosing, it has to have an intended audience. So you purposely are saying this, there's an audience that is intended to, as opposed to writing a diary. When you write a diary, there's no audience intended except for yourself. So self-disclosure is something that we do. We're sharing information that we want other people to know about us, and it has an intended audience. Lastly, self-disclosure is personal. You're sharing information that someone couldn't have unless they know you. Now, in the age again of cyberspace, people can get your social security number, as I was just talking with my video editor about. They can know all sorts of information about you before you ever disclose it. So that's why we need to be careful about the information that we share across the internet. But those are the kinds of things we deal with when we talk about interpersonal communication and self-disclosure. Let's go and talk more about self-disclosure. And the first idea is that self-disclosure is very powerful. We tend to take lightly the things that we say to others, but it can both help and it can harm people and relationships. And one of my course professors said that self-disclosure is like giving someone a stick that they can hit you with. If you trust them, you might actually give them a stick, and if you trust them a lot, you may give them a bigger stick. But if you don't trust them, you don't give them a stick at all. One of my students said, and I love this about teaching because my students teach me things too. And one of my students said, well, also self-disclosure could be like a pillow that you give someone that they put under your butt when you're about to fall. Or even more better, it is a stick that you give someone else that they can give back to you as a staff that you can use to support your walk through life. Oh, that's why I love teaching, because I never know what my students are going to teach me. So that statement came from a student. In the 70s, a man named John Powell wrote a book called I'm Afraid to Tell You Who I Am. Oh, so powerful. I still have that copy from my undergrad days. But I'm afraid to tell you who I am because if I tell you who I am, you may not like me, and I'm all that I have. So if I share myself with you, if I risk myself to make myself vulnerable, and you don't like me and you don't accept me, then I can be very hurt. So that's why we have to be careful about our self-disclosures. Now, I'll say right at the beginning of this introduction that self-disclosures come in many different sizes. I'm a high discloser. I share most of my life with other people because, well, then nobody can ever blackmail me because I've already told everybody everything. But I'm a high discloser, and I found for in my life, it has brought many benefits to me because I get help from people when I need it. However, many other people are not high disclosures. They don't want to share their whole life, and so that makes a difference too. So, well, when we talk about self-disclosure, we're talking about risk-taking behavior. It is risky, and we always need to be comprehending then what it is we're telling people. Now, I've talked about self-disclosure and what it is. That is a sharing of self with others through talk or writing. It can be face-to-face or it can be cyberspace. It is sharing information that other people could not know about you without talking to you. And in these days, it has more to do with sharing feelings, understandings, and those sorts of things. And then it is sharing on purpose. You have an audience that you share this information with. Let's go to point 2, and that has to do with the difference between self-disclosure and gossip. Oh no, did I say the word gossip? I know you don't gossip, but sometimes I might fall into a conversation and gossip. Gossip is different from self-disclosure in that self-disclosure is information that an individual is sharing about self. Gossip is when you're sharing information about a third party, someone who's not there. Gossip can be very, very harmful in that it normally includes information that's not confirmed. It's things that we make up or we heard from the grapevine, and it may not be true. So it could really harm people. The only time you should be talking about someone who's not there is, let's say, for example, you have a vulnerable person, a child or vulnerable adult who reveals something to you that someone may be abusing them. Now that is a moment when you do need to reveal that information. But other information, very often people share with us, and they do it in confidence, and then some of us go and repeat it. I never do that, but some people that I know may repeat that information. Gossip is something that can be casual or unconstrained conversation or reports about other people, and we need to be careful about talking about things that we don't know to be true. Also, you need to be careful about sitting or being in groups where gossip is going on, because often people will take that gossip and say, well, for example, I'm a minister, and as a minister, sometimes people in the church will talk about each other and they'll gossip. I never ever engage in those conversations. I don't stay there in their presence, because then someone will say, well, Reverend Byrd said it, because I was there at the presence of that conversation. So you really need to be careful. At work, gossip can come back to you. Lastly, gossip kills, and it gets sharper with age. Sometimes the older we get and the less ideas we have. People who have ideas don't gossip a lot because they have other things to talk about. People who don't have any ideas, they talk about other folks. Let's move on to the third point of this lecture, which has to do with reasons that we self-disclose. People may wonder, well, why do we do that? Self-disclosure, number one, helps to improve our mental health and our physical health. We know, for example, that men die 10 years younger on average than women. And one hypothesis is because we teach men not to share themselves. We teach them not to share their emotions. We teach them not to share their ideas, that it might make them vulnerable. But that causes stress. That causes stress, heart attacks, strokes. And so we tend to think that one of the reasons that happens is because we teach men not to disclose. We also know, for example, from studies on college students, believe it or not, from the Student Health Center, that students who have a cold, we're talking about a simple cold, tend to get over it better when they have at least one other person to self-disclose to. And in fact, one of our great books on self-disclosure, Sidney Gerard, Your Transparent Self, told us that if you have one good friend, one good person in your life that you can disclose to, that your life can be healthy. We're not talking about a spiritual being like God. We're talking about another human being to talk to. And I know I wouldn't have been able to make it through my life with the good girlfriends, without the good girlfriends that I have. So it improves your mental health. It improves your physical health. Secondly, self-disclosure helps us to maintain interpersonal relationships. Self-disclosure, when you're sharing yourself with another, helps another person to understand you, to know you better. And people who understand you and know you better tend to be more willing to help you and more supportive. If we don't understand what's going on, then we can't help you. I just found out from one of my nieces that who is in prison actually, who said that she always felt that she was not worthy. She was not worthy of life, and that she didn't think she could do what other people did. Well, she never told us that when she was 11, when she started getting into trouble. So now at 35, she's revealing that. Well, now that I know that, I can help her. I can help her become a better acquainted with herself. So maintaining interpersonal relationships, improving intimacy. How can someone know you if you never say I love you? Remember that, we'll have another lecture coming up, but emotions are things that are only felt within self. If you don't disclose them, if you don't say I love you, I like you, I think you're great, then the other person doesn't know that. So maintaining interpersonal relationships is the second reason that we disclose. A third reason is to increase understanding. My perfect example of this is when I was in college, I was in my dorm room, and all of the girls were talking about their boyfriends and the love interest that they had. I was laying on my bed, and all of a sudden I said, I love Henry. And Henry was the guy that I was dating and actually ended up marrying. But until I spoke it, I never understood that. I never knew that I loved him until I said it to someone else. And that can happen very often when you're disclosing to another person. You say things that you may not be aware of, and then you become aware of them. So increase understanding of self and others. We also engage in self-disclosure to clarify, oh gosh, this is so important, to make clear what we mean. So when I'm in the process of writing an autobiography, and one of the things that I do in there is that I tell stories. I tell stories about my life, and then I try to clarify those stories, make them more clear so that people can understand and learn from them. So self-disclosure helps you to clarify. And I'll give you a great example. A couple of years ago, I was working with a company that was owned by a Chinese man, and he had a designer there who was also Chinese. And I went to them to get them to make me something. When I went to them, I knew nothing about what they were doing. So I would ask them questions. And they started to get a little bit irritated with me because they thought that I was questioning their competence. But actually I was trying to learn. And as they seemed to get more irritated, and I was getting more irritated, I stopped and said, let's talk about how we're talking to each other. I said, for me, I don't know the process, so I'm asking you questions so that I can learn. So I revealed myself. And then I said, and also people tend to assume, I said black people actually do kind of talk louder than other folks. We talk loud, we gesture. I said, that doesn't mean I'm angry with you. This is just my normal voice of discussion. So then the owner of the company said, hey, Chinese people talk loud too, and we can be assertive in our talking. And he said, so when I'm talking to you, he says, a lot of it is joking. I'm joking with you. And so we clarified ourselves to each other, and I understood that he was telling jokes. The whole atmosphere changed. I was willing to say, hey, I don't know what's going on. And he was willing to say, hey, I think some of the stuff you're doing is funny, so I'm telling jokes. And the conversation was smooth after that, and we didn't have any problems. So clarifying oneself is very, very important. What do you mean? And don't assume that people know what you mean just because you said it. My dad and I used to have these misunderstandings because my dad would say, I would talk to my dad and he would say, well, daughter, sometimes I just don't understand you. I don't think you can think well. Well, the thing was that my dad didn't have, his hearing wasn't that good, and also he didn't have the same understanding of life that I did. We came from very different stations of life, and so I would try to clarify myself, and he wouldn't understand. Then he would try to clarify himself, and then I might not understand, and he would say, "Well, daughter, I don't know what's wrong with you. You just don't know how to listen." But we kept at it because we were father and daughter, and we knew we needed to understand each other. So we continued to clarify ourselves, not assuming, "Oh, you ought to know what I'm talking about because I'm your dad." So those are some of the can cause some problems in our families when we don't want to clarify ourselves. When you're talking to people, you should always understand that there's going to be some understanding. There's some misunderstandings. You should expect that there's going to be some misunderstandings, and that you will need to clarify yourself, and don't get upset about it. The last reason that we self-disclose is catharsis. Catharsis is a Greek word that means cleansing of the soul. And so we disclose, we can see it in professions like the church. We disclose to the priest, we disclose to the minister. Some sex workers, now I've learned a new term, survival sex. People who have sex in order to make money to survive say that some of the people who hired them never engage in sex, they just talk to them. We have a very lonely society, actually. People say that they're lonely because they don't have anybody to talk to. So we go to the bar and we talk to the bartender. And we go to the barber shop and we talk to the barber. We go to the style shop and we talk to the stylist. So we need to disclose because catharsis is a cleansing of the soul. And so this self-disclosure is very important for that. Let's go on to point 4, and that is some guidelines. I can't possibly give you all of that now, but I'll give you a few in self-disclosure. Always consider who you are speaking to. Who is that person? Is this information appropriate for them, their age? Is it appropriate for the relationship? Is it appropriate for when you're disclosing, where you're disclosing? I'll give an example. When I turned 18, for some reason, both of my parents decided that I was their best friend. Before 18, they treated me like I was their child. So there were certain conversations that we never had, things that they said to each other that they never said to me. But when I turned 18, all of a sudden, I became their best friend. Very uncomfortable because I'm your daughter. I don't need to hear all your personal information. And I had to train my parents that there were certain things that were appropriate and certain things not appropriate, because even though I'm 18, I'm still your child. And in that situation, there's stuff I don't want to know. So who are you? What's the age of the person? What is your relationship with the individual? And consequences. Oh my goodness gracious. What are the consequences of your disclosure? Your words can be taken to other places and hurt other people. So you always need to be thinking about what are the consequences. I heard a guy once say, he always thought that his mother didn't want him, just by the way she treated him, something in their relationship. And finally she said to him, "I didn't want you when you were born." What a statement to hear from your mother. In one way he was glad, he said, because it confirmed how he always felt that she didn't want him. But that's not something I would ever tell my child, because it hurts. Wow, that even before you got here I didn't want you. What is a statement like that? So you need to always be aware of the consequences. Let me bring this lesson to a conclusion by saying that self-disclosure is a necessary component of interpersonal relationships. It is risky. It's not without risk, because someone may use that information to hurt you. They may get a big stick and hit you over the head with it. They may also use it to help you, though. Self-disclosure can be helpful. Now, this topic is very complex. It cannot be fully explored in this short talk. So I ask you to please go to the PowerPoint that's linked to this lesson. It's at the bottom of the video. So you go there, you click it on, and you'll see accompanying PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is not synced with the lesson. It's totally different information. And I hope you will do that. I hope you will join me the next time to learn about interpersonal communication. I hope that you've learned something today about self-disclosure. and I want you to start living your best life. I'll leave you with the statement on Star Trek. I'm a big trekker. He says, live long and prosper.